Well, hello to our SUAA members. I'm Thomas Martin, the Director of External Relations with SUAA. And today I'll be talking to Andrew Bodewes, who is SUAA's newest contractual lobbyist. He started out working for us on January 1, and we're getting into the thick of things for this spring session. So we wanted to introduce Andrew to you and let you know a little bit about him and the work that he will be doing for SUAA. So, Andrew, I know that you've been working over at the Capitol for quite some time now as a lobbyist and previously as a staffer. There's some different roads to getting into politics and legislative work. What's your background? How did you get into this field?
Like so many people, bad luck, poor life choices. No, no. So I've been doing this now. I'm 45, and I've been doing this now, I guess, for about 24 years, like you say, in one way, shape, or form. Uh, you know, I started. Interestingly enough, I started for the Illinois House Democratic Organization under who was then Speaker Mike Madigan. At that time, there had been a long history of Republican governors. There hadn't been a lot of Democratic governors, and then now infamous, then new and young, Rod Blagojevich won,
Hmm.
and that created an opportunity for a lot of the Democratic staff that have been working in the General Assembly to take jobs with higher pay in the governor's office. And it created a big vacuum. And they, much like universities today with their recruitment and retention issues, where all of a sudden the General Assembly was faced with a recruitment and retention issue because all of the staff had left. So I took advantage of that. I started with them. And they said, here, this guy's young and dumb. He doesn't know anything. Let's put him on something that we don't have to deal with a whole lot, pensions and
Ah,
public employee health care. And so they said, here you go. You can have this. And I thought, oh, okay. I'm not really thinking about retirement, but I can learn. And the rest is history. I stayed there for years. Went over. I was the director of governmental affairs for the teachers' retirement system. That's the retirement system that covers all of the downstate teachers, K through 12 teachers, I should say. So it was governmental affairs for them. Uh, Went ahead and started a business with another friend of mine who we're still in business together, Pete Baroni. He also works for all of the members as well, along with me. And we've been doing it ever since. And I've focused during that space. I've focused a lot on pensions and public employee health care and those types of issues. Um, so yeah, like I said, yeah, over 2 decades of experience in it, and just kind of I think people end up becoming a lobbyist through different pathways, but it's usually for the same reason. It's a good space for those C minus average GPA students to still be able to feed their family.
well, yeah, and C's get degrees, so it still
Right.
works. Um, I don't know, for the SUAA members that don't know, I'm the in-house lobbyist. I'm very new to this and still working on developing relationships with the legislators. Drew, how's that process been for you? You every year you can get, well, maybe not now these days with how some of the elections go, but you got a lot of names to learn, a lot of people to meet. How do you, as a lobbyist, kind of foster those relationships with so many different legislators?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I mean, so when I started, it was a very different landscape. Legislators tended to be elected for long periods of time. I remember back, I started when Ralph Caparelli was there, and I think Ralph had been in the GA for like 118 years at that time. So it was you built these relationships slowly over time with people who really had a great understanding of the process. The flip side of it was if you wanted to talk to them, you had to go stand outside their office in a line of people waiting to get in to talk to them, right? I mean, that was the nature. Or, there is a certain amount of this in this business. Know what bar they drank at,
Yeah.
and knew what time they would be there, right? That was kind of the way. And so there was good and there was bad in it. Now and you know this, Thomas, the turnover is so fast. I mean,
Mm.
every 2 years, I'm learning a whole new list of names. You're investing a lot of energy and effort, sort of investing in those relationships, but yet at the same token, um, they may not be around a long time. Um, when I first started again, when Rob Goyevitz got elected around that time, the chairman of pensions had been, Bob Malaro had been doing pensions for 25 years. I never knew as much as the chairman did. Now, our chairs turn over a lot faster. There's more committees, more stuff going on. So I think, that's gotten more difficult. But the best thing, like any industry, we've got new tools. Now, instead of standing outside their office for 45 minutes to ask
Yeah.
them if they're going to support my billing committee, I just send them a text message. And so, we've got these new tools. You can call, you can text, and so, we've gotten a lot more efficient in some ways and a few steps back in others.
It's nicer. I know, just even in the case of my father, who used to have to come down to the Capitol, and if you wanted an interview with a legislator, hey, committee was supposed to start at 4. Well, if it starts at 6, tough luck. You're still waiting for them to get out. And now it's who needs to come down to the Capitol? You just pull up Zoom or Microsoft Teams, as we are here, and you can talk to them digitally. So I'm glad you have started to get started in this era, as opposed to waiting outside someone's office for 45 minutes. And sorry, they've got another meeting. You'll have to get back with us later. So you do have a lot of experience, and I know you've been involved with IRTA, and I think TRS as well, even to do work on behalf of Teachers Retirement System. Um, Other than the extravagant pay, for the State Universities and Annuitants Association, what made you say yes to joining SUAA with you and Mr. Baroni as the contractual lobbyists?
Yeah. So, I mean, in my background, and like you said, I work for people who work for a living, or who did work for a living. That's where I come from. That's what's important to me. And well, I think one of the things I like about that approach is there's no ambiguity, right? I mean, you look at our members, right? They work their many cases their whole life, regardless, full career. They were promised certain things. They were promised, pension and health care and post-employment benefits as part of that compensation, as part of that package. They are owed that. There is no question that cannot be diminished. It cannot be impaired. It must be completed. So I like that. That is such a bright line. It's such a clear line, and making sure that people get what they were promised and what they're owed. That's such an easy road for me. I mean, that is what I do. That is it's who I am. So I think there's synergy in that sense, right? That you guys believe in fighting for the thing that I believe in fighting for. That's a big piece of it. The other thing that's kind of an advantage to me is I can't remember the last time that that I missed a pension meeting, right? I mean, if they're having a pension conversation, if they're having a hearing, a committee on anything, I'm there, right? So it does give me some efficiency in the workplace, right? I don't have to stop working on a transportation issue or a business issue or a God knows what to run over and get in and get our slip done. There's not a committee member that I don't have the cell phone number of, that I don't talk to on a regular basis. The chairs and I, I mean, we get coffee, we get drinks, we get food, we get, I mean, there's a relationship there. So there's also a great efficiency here. It just takes me a little less time to do something because I was already on my way to talk to that person or to go to that meeting or to do that. Same thing with reading bills. When I first started, there'll be about 7,000 bills, introduced.
Hmm.
Just like you, Thomas and I, we're going to read all of these bills. I will let you in on a little secret. I read pension bills faster than anybody else, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
I know because I've read it 114 times before, right? There's not an area where there's lots and lots of new ideas. And when I read that bill, I know where it's from because I can remember 6 years ago that the Chicago Teachers Union testified in support of that bill, right? So,
Hmm.
so I walk in with a little bit of knowledge, and that just helps that process. Just puts a little bit of oil on those squeaky joints, and that's useful as well.
And I'll say, yes, what Drew's saying is correct. And I know that myself and our executive director, Brian Sodi, really appreciated it is that Drew has such expertise in this field. And Brian is still relatively new at 2 years in this job, and now I'm trying to get started. Andrew has been a fantastic resource so far for our office here, and helping the association build a coalition with legislators, thanks to his previous relationships. Um, I will just mention, as Drew was talking about bills, I will let our members know that we will be sending out an email about some bills that SUA has introduced, one on deferred retirement option plan, another about improving communications with SERS, and also getting a healthcare ombudsman over at the Department of Central Management Services. So I will let everybody know about more of those bills more in detail going forward. I'm making the transition to say is we have other bills related to Tier 2 reforms, none that have been introduced by SUAA like the previous ones I mentioned. But Andrew had a great quote that we used in our last State House report to our members. And that quote was more or less that the most expensive thing the state can do when it comes to Tier 2 pensions is nothing. Andrew, with Tier 2 being at the forefront of the pension discussions these days or reforms on Tier 2, can you expound on what you meant with that quote?
Yeah, yeah. So we think of pensions. We think of pensions in a lot of ways in the state as something that the state's doing. And this is a state thing. And this is, whether it's SURS or Chicago Teachers Pension Fund or Bloomington Police Pension Fund, right? Whatever it is, we think of these as really being a creature of state law. And that's kind of true. But the important thing to keep in mind is that we are constantly interacting with the federal government on this. So all of these plans are what are called a tax qualified plan, which means that you don't pay taxes on the money as it's deposited. Their taxes are deferred. You pay taxes on the money as you take it out. This is what all retirement plans are that are qualified. But in order to do that, you've got to follow the federal law. So really, all of these pension plans are first and foremost creatures of the federal government. Now, many of these plans, all of the plans in Chicago, plans covering K through 12 teachers, and most importantly for us, covering SURS members, all of those, in addition to being tax qualified plans, are Social Security replacement plans. What does that mean? Well, way back in the day, when Social Security was created, states were first exempted, and then the federal law changed that, and they allowed states and units of government to participate in Social Security, but they didn't mandate it.
Hmm.
Many states, like Illinois, kept all or some of their employees out, and the reason for that was that Social Security favors low-income workers. You get a higher percentage of your pay if you're on the lower end of the pay scale, and a smaller percentage of your pay if you're on the higher end. What was being offered to teachers, again, whether they're K through 12 or higher ed, these folks tended to be disadvantaged by that lower income favoring because they were oftentimes skilled professionals. So that means that they were not offered Social Security, or the state of Illinois never entered into that agreement for these folks. But in order to stay out, you have to be classified as a Social Security replacement plan. And there's a legal test. There's actually a 3-part test that you have to pass to remain a Social Security replacement plan. That test we oftentimes refer to as the safe harbor provision.
Mm-hmm.
I keep reading about the safe harbor provision in the news, and I keep realizing that journalists have no idea what it actually means. But that's neither here nor there. But that test is the safe harbor provision. If you meet the test, then you don't have to guarantee a minimum benefit equal to or greater than Social Security to each individual member. Tier 2 is violating that. That means at any point, quite frankly, at any point, the federal government could come in and say, you are no longer a Social Security replacement plan, SURS. That would require every community college, every university, every school district, every police department, fire department to start contributing to Social Security. That would be 6.2% of pay for the individual and another 6.2% from the employer. As you can well imagine, that would be economically devastating, really, to both parties, right? Because, if you're already contributing 9% into SURS and now you've got to contribute an extra 6.2%, right? That's really eating into your income, especially if you're a young worker and, just maybe starting out, young family, that kind of thing. That's devastating, especially with the price of eggs these days. So it's also devastating to taxpayers, right? Because that's 6.2% of payroll. The average I always use, most public employers, about 75% of their total budget is payroll related. So that's 75% of their budget goes up by 6.2%. That's devastating.
Significant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's significant. And here's the worst part. They have to pay that 6.2% going back 10 years with interest as established by the IRS. For a lot of school districts, the payment that they would owe in year one would be about 100% of their annual budget. I mean, it's phenomenally devastating. So we can't do that. We have to fix that. The governor's acknowledged we have to fix this. Where I think the governor, who I got to be honest, has been a real advocate of full funding. He's getting ready to announce next week his plan. He wants to get to 100% funded in 2048 instead of 90% in 45. I mean, the man's good with understanding money, and understanding the value of that, and understanding how we get out of this underfunded crisis that we've been in for so long. So I appreciate all of that. I really do. From the bottom of my heart, I agree with him. It's yeoman's work. Where he has a disagreement with me, and I think with SUAA as well, he's sort of proposing that we do the minimum possible fix to tier 2. So he is advocating for the minimum guaranteed by federal law, the minimum benefit guaranteed by federal law. I've gotten, just in this short time, I've gotten to meet so many of our members, and my time in school and interacting with teachers. I know how professional and smart and great and wonderful and hardworking the folks at our universities and community colleges are. My belief, and I think SUA's belief, and I think many of our viewers' belief, is they deserve a little bit more than the minimum allowed under federal law, right? So they deserve retirement security, quite frankly. They deserve to be able to know, just like the tier 1 folks do, that regardless of how long they live, regardless of what happens, if they get ill, that they're going to have access to retirement security. Not be rich. Nobody made it rich doing this, but at least have the security to know that they're going to have a roof over their head, food on their table, and be able to have a little bit of fun in their life as well. So I believe that should be the minimum standard, not what will the federal government let me do at the bare minimum.
And what's the incentive to start getting into an SURS or SE for the bare minimum, as opposed to joining the private sector?
Right.
So yes, anything related to tier 2, Drew, myself, Brian Sodi, we will be following this closely, along with the bills that we have introduced. And as Drew was saying, thousands of bills, not all of them dealing with higher education and pension, but there will be many more out there dealing with insurance, healthcare, higher education, that we will be following. Drew, just a little bit about yourself before we close out. I know you come down to Springfield, but it's one of your homes. Where, where's your other home, family
Yeah,
situation,
so
hobbies?
yeah, I'm a downstate boy. I grew up, I was born in Springfield, grew up in Springfield. I moved to an old farmhouse outside of Springfield, about 30 miles south of Springfield. I still have that property. Love it there. I sort of feel like that's my spiritual home in a lot of respects. But I did meet my spiritual partner, my life partner. She's great. Her name's Nicole. And she had a job and was working in Chicago. And we've been together now for, I don't know, a very long time. Which again, I'm not sure that she's good at making life choices because she's stuck with me. But um,
Yeah.
but so now I call Naperville home. That was our compromise. I can get down to Springfield in about 2.5 hours. But what I find is I often joke and say I live in Pontiac because I spend the
Yes.
majority of my life on I-55, either northbound or southbound. But I love the state. I love Illinois. I'm born and raised. I'll die here. I love Illinois. I love how diverse the state is. I love that in 2.5 hours I can go. I can go from Naperville. I can be in Chicago. I can be in the heart of the city, and all of that energy and everything that's going on there. I can also be down at the farm and hear nothing but the birds.
Mhm.
And depending on the time of year, the tractors. I love that, and Illinois is so great because you can celebrate the diversity that Illinois offers. My biggest hobby, I love to cook. I love to cook. I do all the cooking in the house, and I'm pretty handy around the house. So that's usually if I'm not doing this, I'm probably either in the kitchen or in my workshop doing something.
Well, and you got to be handy when you've got a farmhouse, an old farmhouse you're on, and and I'll just say again to our members, Drew's been very helpful and handy so far at uh, navigating these bills that have come out this spring session and helping us build those relationships with these legislators. And we've been very appreciative that he's joined and. I think to our members, you'll see that Drew will make a real impact this legislative session and legislative sessions going forward. So uh, I know sometimes I'm going back and forth between Drew and Andrew, but whether it's Drew or Andrew, Drew, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And I know I'll look forward to working alongside you this session. And I think our members will look forward to any updates we have for them going forward. So thank you again for joining us today for this introduction.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Certainly. Take care.
Right.